This is American Dreams, a program where we interview thought leaders and entrepreneurs and bring their ideas to you in real-world context.
I'm visiting here today with Pat Wilkison. Pat, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. Wonderful to be with you.
So, Pat, for the listeners, can you give your background of what brought you up to where you are today?
Sure.
And what are you currently working on?
Okay, sure. Happy to. Well, let me see. Going back to the early years, I was a Southern California native, so born and raised in Los Angeles. I reflect upon those years, and I'm grateful for those because I grew up in a very heterogeneous environment. Uniquely raised by a single mother, hardworking young mother. Got to grow up with folks with just a great sense of diversity around religious beliefs, socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnic differences. Got to live in different cities around the broader Los Angeles area. So some really formative years for me. Interestingly and somewhat ironically, this kid who grew up in that environment chose to go into the military academy for college. So pretty big transformation or move from a Southern California kid with not a lot of rules into a very rigid, structured military type organization. It's kind of funny because those who knew me in my early years would say I was definitely not the military type, and I was not the stereotypical cadet. But interestingly, when I arrived at the school at West Point in the late 80s, while there were a number of silly rules, many of which I deeply did not understand nor like, nor really want to tolerate, the principles of the school and the concept and the military deeply resonated with me. And I can vividly remember when you first arrive, they send you through the basic training. So classic military basic training. They call it cadet basic training because it's unique for the roughly 1,000 cadets that have come in there. When they would get our entire class together, as we were forming up, I remember them playing the Lee Greenwood song, the chorus of which is "Proud to be an American." And while I had low tolerance for all the rules and what I thought were silly protocols, that I deeply aligned with. And I appreciated that moment that was the right path for me to be on. That then set me into, I'll call it my first decade of adulthood, which was effectively all in the uniform, in service. I was fortunate to be in the what they call the branch of aviation. So I was a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. And in so doing, I got to work with some really special teams, folks who had amazing proficiency in unique specialties. And I learned a ton about the importance of high performance teams and the value of trust and interdependency in those type of situations. I then also had the opportunity to work in a specialization of military intelligence. And so this was late 80s, 90s timeframe when many of the most advanced innovations of technology were still being deployed by our military. And that included launching satellites for communications. We were highly reliant upon GPS. I got to work on intel gathering systems, how you then process all that information. We were working on things such as protecting network security before there were such things as, the term of, cyber and things that we are core to what we focus on these days and think about these days. So those are really formative years for me, Alan. And I was able to build upon that as I hung up the uniform and transitioned into my, so-called civilian life and moved into commercial industry. While many people would say that was a huge leap, from my vantage point, it was actually much more evolutionary. And the wonderful thing about that transition out of uniform is I was able to really build upon a lot of those wonderful opportunities I had in the military to focus on unique applications for advanced innovations and technologies. And so effectively, I navigated into what we would classify as the technology industry. And my specialty was what the industry would classify as deep tech or infrastructure tech. And I specifically focused on data storage, high performance and high density data storage. And in so doing, got to work with some of the world's most amazing companies, many of which we use on a daily basis today, their solutions. And these are companies like Google's and Amazon's and Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and things of that nature. Through that process, I was afforded the opportunity to really develop a bit of call it a framework or a specialization around identifying opportunities for advanced technologies that could be scaled globally across large companies across multiple continents. And so effectively was able to take businesses from, kind of $0 of revenue or, negative profitability because we were in investment mode, but grow those into largely scaled businesses. And then the final part of that journey was called the most recent decade. And in that phase of my life, if you will, I was able to take all those previous professional learnings, coupled uniquely with some critical personal development learnings and opportunities as well, which was the raising of 4 children. And I find that I'm now at this point in life where I'm able to combine the unique aspects of my professional life and my personal life and help the next wave of innovators build really transformative businesses and solving the challenges and opportunities that are in front of us as a civilization and humanity.
When everything is said and done, Pat, how do you want to be known? When a person is looking back at your journey through life, what is the most important thing for you?
That's a fantastic question. I don't think about it often, but I'm glad you asked the questions because it's forcing me to think about it now. I would love to, before I'm done, call it, make it my highest order kind of deliverable to this planet, to our society, is demonstrate the power of trust. I view trust as the most important aspect in human performance and team performance, and thus the evolution of humanity. And it's been very interesting, Alan. I, having had the opportunity to work in military environments and non-military environments, teams that were, competitive athletic teams, and be able to kind of look at which of those performed the best and which I've underperformed. And I'll share, interestingly, and it was a bit of a surprise for me upon leaving the military, that I find that the majority of our organizations today are underperforming. And I think it's of vital importance that we find ways to collectively, evolve, obviously, but also unlock the extra levels of performance. And my observations and learnings as I've thought about ways to, I'll call it the cross-pollination of the themes that I learned in the military and those that I've watched and observed in the non-military realm, is that when you can have organizations and situations and environments where you have teams that are closely aligned, they're mission-driven, they're trust-based because there's interdependency, that is humanity at its finest. I find that those are the teams that perform the best. And, for me, it becomes an imperative when you're in the military because it's life or death. And I think that's a unique environment. And I don't think everyone needs to be in that environment to ultimately appreciate the value of trust and to build and design and work in ultimately trust-based organizations. But it certainly was very valuable for me. And if I, even think specifically about my role in, as a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, it'd be like the two of us sitting side by side in the aircraft. So one of us makes a mistake, we potentially die, as do all the troops in the back of the aircraft as well. So, there's criticality in that mission, and that then filters through not just in how we perform when we're flying together, but in our training. It drives accountability and dependability in how we behave day in and day out. And those are the types of principles that I find really drive optimal and peak performance for humans. And so where I ultimately want to go with this is I would love to ultimately get to the point where we can quantify the measures of trust, demonstrate the value of that trust in organizations, and then find ways to propagate those principles across a variety of industries. And so today in my capacity, we organize as a group called Integrity Partners. So at our most basic level, we provide growth capital. So we're investors into early stage companies. We'd love to get involved with them early because we view them as embryonic. And we look at these teams that we're working with as true organisms, and how do we help them perform their best? So in many ways, it pulls upon all of the learnings of being a parent, but then also all those great lessons of like the fundamentals of how you build an enduring business. And then we basically look to get involved in situations where we can work with trusted founders and help them build trust-based organizations at the earliest stages, so it becomes a fundamental part of the DNA of the organization.
For more information on integrity, for the listeners, how do they reach you?
Oh, sure. Well, they can reach out to myself or anybody on our team. We of course, stand up a website, www.integrity.partners. So Integrity Partners is the name of the organization. They can find us on LinkedIn or, reach us in any one of those, different methods.
Pat, it's been an honor having you with us today.
Thank you, Alan. Pleasure being with you.